Mr. Chairman. Ms. Holcomb, your organization, outstanding group, actually put forth the Pulpit Initiative and Pulpit Freedom Sunday. As you know, I was one of the original pastors that was a part of that group in 2008. Can you briefly explain to this committee what that event is and what's its purpose?
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. The Pulpit Initiative was designed to bring this issue to a head and to provide a legal challenge to the Johnson Amendment because, as you know, and I'm sure you're well aware, federal law prohibits us from affirmatively suing the IRS outright to deal with this issue. So we started what's called Pulpit Freedom Sunday, where we encourage pastors across the nation to exercise their constitutional rights to free speech and the free exercise of religion, and many of them endorse or oppose candidates on that day, and a number of them provide courtesy copies of their sermons to the IRS and send them in so that they're fully aware of what's going on. We had encouraged, as I mentioned, a legal challenge wanting to go head-to-head with the IRS on this issue and allow a court to rule on the Johnson Amendment's constitutionality or lack thereof, in our opinion. But the IRS has been unwilling to take the bait. It did harass and intimidate one of our pastors for approximately 11 months of an audit, and we defended them throughout that process. But otherwise, it has been unwilling to allow a federal court to address this issue, which is why we're now recommending that Congress go ahead and fix that which was enacted over 60-plus years ago.
So why do you believe the IRS did not respond?
I think there could be it's all speculation. I think it could be a number of different things, but one thing is the IRS may recognize that it's on tenuous constitutional grounds. It probably does not want to have a federal judge actually examine the constitutional violations, both those that I've mentioned in my written testimony, but those that I did not. In addition to vagueness and free speech, the Johnson Amendment is constitutionally questionable in the areas of free exercise in the Establishment Clause, potentially even federal RFRA. So I think that would be one primary reason why the IRS might be reluctant to allow a court to look into this.
So you believe it is an unconstitutional code?
Absolutely. It's an unconstitutional code and frankly has no legitimate basis in law either, having been enacted as a political ploy.
Okay. Ms. Ancali, let me ask you about the vagueness aspect of the Johnson Amendment. How is that complicating the interpretation?
That's a great question. I'm sure you're very aware as a pastor of the fact that many activist organizations actually use that vagueness and the lack of consistency with how the IRS has enforced this statute to chill the speech of pastors, to threaten them into submission, essentially, scaring pastors out of making political statements generally, not just about political candidates, but about, as Mr. Connolly mentioned, moral issues and biblical issues that really affect the life of the church and the life of individual believers.
What about the accusation that somehow this, if it's repealed or changed in any way, the Johnson Amendment, that it would make churches become political action committees where dirty money could be laundered?
Well, the Free Speech Fairness Act is specific in that it doesn't allow more than de minimis incremental costs. So the de minimis factor is not related to the length of the statement, is not related to how many times the statement is made, but is related to the cost of the statement. So the whole purpose of that provision within the Free Speech Fairness Act, as I understand it, is to eliminate the ability for churches to become political action committees.
How would you respond to that, Ms. Holcomb?
I would absolutely agree. Look, the Free Speech Fairness Act is extremely simple. All it does is create a relief valve for free speech so that 501c3 organizations, particularly churches, which is my primary concern in this instance, would be allowed to once again fully exercise their First Amendment freedom to speak freely without having the IRS burst in through their church doors and censor their sermons.
So it's not legal for churches to give candidates, or is it?
No.
Give money to candidates?
Absolutely not.
And would that change?
It would not change. Free Speech Fairness Act does not in any way eviscerate current campaign finance laws. So those concerns really are not applicable in this context.
Okay, Ms. Engelbrecht, let me ask you, are you aware that the veterans organizations are also 501c3 organizations that are both tax exempt and receive charitable donations?
And there are all kinds of organizations that are C3s beyond just churches, and that's one of the reasons this is such a critical debate.
Okay, so my question here has to come with fairness of law. Is there a discrepancy in the way that different 501c3s are treated?
I would hope not. All I can say is in our experience, the Johnson Amendment seemed to be a gateway to a type of abuse that I don't think any American citizen should have to endure, including visits from the domestic terrorism unit of the FBI, the repeated audits by the IRS, OSHA showing up, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms showing up twice.
Well, let me ask Ms. Ann Colley or Ms. Holcomb, either one. There seems to me to be a broad discrepancy in the way 501c3s are treated here, and there's a direct discrimination.
I think that's exactly right, if I may jump in. You've got some 26 different organizations that are exempt under the IRS code. Only C3s have this explicit speech restriction. And frankly, it's unfair, and that's what the Free Speech Fairness Act is designed to do, is restore that fairness for all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the ranking member for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.